Arts theater in Palestine, Cinema Zenin.
Cool.
Let's dance it.
Yep.
Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hello, Ron. Hello,
Hi,
Heidi.
everybody.
Hello, Ron.
Hello. Let's see, let me bring my screen back up here.
And Sam. So usually we start with a quick sort of check-in to see how people are doing. Are you staying or leaving, Heiner?
I'm better leaving. I would like not to interrupt and just break out after a few minutes. It was great to see common faces and new faces. And next time, next week or next weekend, let's see. Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay. Take
Bye-bye.
care, Heiner.
Hi.
Okay. So hello, the rest of you. So let's just do a quick check-in. I'm excited about this one. Personally, made me a little bit nervous to see a bunch of new faces who are going to show up for it, but it's not everybody who sort of says they're going to be here who are going to be here necessarily, but it's always a good challenge. But Jean-Paul is showing up, which is lovely. How are the rest of you doing? Where are you? What's going on?
I'm still fooling with my screen here, so I'm a little distracted. And I'm here in Chicago as usual, and I'm at home, not at the guitar lesson studio. So I'm in the dark room.
Okay, cool.
Weather is hot and humid here.
It's hot and humid. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, and I see Simona. That would also be a first time. I don't see your face, Simona, though. Oh, there she is.
Let's see.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine. So we're doing sort of a quick check-in in the beginning of the meeting, which means just sort of saying hello so that everybody has had a chance to pop in and say something. So where are you, Simona? You're in your office?
No, actually I'm doing home office, so I'm trying to move to another room so that I can have a bit more light. I'll be there in a second.
We can't hear you when you're turning your back.
Okay, sorry. I was saying, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, yeah. So,
Can you
so
also
you're in
see
your
me?
home office.
Can you see?
Yeah, we see you too. So that's
Okay,
all good.
perfect.
We can see you from the nose up.
Okay, and a practice for everybody. Once we're sort of really starting, it makes good sense to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, just because often there's feedback and stuff like that. Okay, so how about the rest of you? Sam, Heidi, anybody want to say a few words?
Well, I'm a couple of hours time zone difference from Ron, but Ron, unlike the muggy heat, we actually are in the high 60s Fahrenheit. So it's probably teens Celsius. So it's very nice here in Washington State. That's why I've got my sweatshirt on.
That's
that's
cold for you.
Sorry, Fleming, I was talking.
Is that cold for Washington?
For the summer it is, yes. Yeah. My dad was actually a little bit dismayed at how cold the summer is here up in Camino Island.
Okay.
Okay, I'm in Italy and I'm sweating like mad. It's really hot here. Oh, you know, all sweaty.
You look sweaty.
Yeah.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi.
We're just checking in.
Wonderful. I am freshly awake, and I've already been nourishing some relationships this morning. I was just reading over what our work is today. And yeah, I have a lot of my life that is devoted to relationships. So I'm excited that we're feeling into that space and being present with it, because it's kind of the heartbeat of everything.
Yep.
And I miss you guys. I've missed it the last couple of weeks, so it's really nice to be back.
It's lovely to see you back. So now for you, the new people here, let me just sort of outline a couple of things. We're having a conversation, but it's maybe a conversation that's a little bit different from many meetings or conversations where everybody's sort of standing in line to say something, to say if you're just listening in order to then say your thing or to answer what somebody else is doing, that's not so much what we're doing here. It's meant to be a more sort of slow and present conversation where you take time to actually sense what's going on and feel what you feel about it and be aware of whether what you're going to say really needs to be said here. Is it something that moves us forward, or was it just something you were hurrying to say because you had something to say? So we can always get better at doing that. None of us are perfect. Hello, Harry.
Hi.
Hi. So one thing that helps is to be very aware of your physical senses and your body. So now before we start, I suggest we just take a moment to take a few breaths. Notice your feet on the ground or yourself sitting in your chair. Just feel that you have a body. Take a few breaths and notice how that feels. Notice that you're here in your own room, you're in front of a screen, and you're also here with all of us. And we're trying to be present, all of us together, and still having all of our senses. So now let's start. The theme today is our relationships. So it's to explore a little deeper. What does it mean to have close relationships? We have different kinds. Some people are in couples, some people live in community, some people are connected with people in a different way. And the idea is to explore that a little deeper and a little more honestly and authentically. And the meeting we had the last time, it's not a problem, any of you that weren't there, but we sort of ended with, gee, it would be nice if we could just, where we were now, if we could just sort of continue like that, because sometimes it takes a while to sort of warm up and feel we're really present and ready to talk about something that's present with us. So we'll try to start a little more in that place where we actually can talk about the real stuff right away. So we need somebody to kick it off. I can start, or maybe you, Tammy.
So I guess I'm curious, in relationships is such a rich topic. I mean, is it useful to have an example of, a challenge or I guess I'm curious about because I wasn't there for the last one, and I'd like to start in that middle feeling place about what maybe I can test and just see what you would feel would be a good, is it a story? Is it a...
Well, I think, I don't know. I mean, I think it's what we feel when we do it, but I would like to sort of get to some of the assumptions we have about it. Like one thing, last time we were talking about relationships and somebody says, oh, well, you, Fleming, you've been married for a long time, so you must be really good at it, kind of thing. But that brought up to me probably that there would be a lot of sort of misunderstandings or assumptions about what that means.
Yeah.
I've been married for 37 years. So some people would think, oh, that means you found the right person. Or it means, oh, you really, you must be really committed to that or something. where really I don't even look at it that way. Like Birgit and I have been married for a long time, but that's in part based on that we didn't promise very much, that we took it rather loosely. We just decided it would be nice to be together, and if we have any problems with anything, we'll try to sort it out. But we didn't promise to be together forever until we die. We didn't promise anything, particularly other than communicating, being willing to show up with each other. We promised that, we did promise that we would never go to sleep angry at each other, meaning if there's anything that's really we have to sort out, we'll sort it out. And that has, in a way, kept us together. But lots of other things are very loose. Our relationship is rather loose. We haven't particularly promised to be particularly faithful or to always be there or to always agree on lots of things. And the other thing that's maybe odd about it, I don't consider it something very personal, like a close relationship like that. To me, it's more like it's being present and it's showing up. But in an odd way, it matters less for me who the other person is. I mean, I'm using that in my relationship to my wife, which has lasted for a long time, but I want to show up a similar way with everybody, meaning I would like to be present for what's alive between us. I mean, for me, it's not something fixed, or it's not based on, oh, I know this person really well after many years, so therefore we get along well. I consider it more sort of it's hard to describe, but something impersonal, where it's just a way of being present. That's for me is a relationship more than it is a lot of history and getting to know each other well and navigating each other's desires or issues. So I can imagine that's maybe would be a little controversial. Other people might have a different way of looking at it. I don't know. Let's have some other points of view or something.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Does your partner has the same view on the relationship?
Do what? Say that again?
Does your partner has the same view, the same concept of what you do together?
Almost. Almost. We would express it a little differently. But ultimately, if we talk about it, we more or less have the same view of taking it fairly lightly. I mean, she would probably say that I'm taking it more lightly than her or something like that. I mean, we would have a little conversation about that, but I think ultimately we have a similar thing, and we do go back to that once in a while, and we do pass that on as relationship advice, that really the most important thing is that you can work out how to relate. Everything else is sort of secondary. It's not that you have the same list of things you like or something like that. All of that doesn't matter. I mean, that can be worked out. And if some things don't match, it's not a problem. What's important is that you can talk about it, and particularly that you can talk about things that are a little difficult. Like if somehow there's something you really don't like, or the other person did something that you don't think is okay. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you instantly leave them and get divorced and see the kids every second weekend? Or, I mean, some people do that. Hi, Martin. So my commitment is more to the relationship, which really means, I mean, that's a noun. I'd rather see it as a verb, that it's to relate. So the commitment is to relate, to do whatever is necessary, and never to make it really a thing. Yeah.
So maybe I will jump in there. I really appreciate the piece around it being open for you. And it is a different model, and it's neat to see. For me, I live in a community home, so there's 8 of us. And those are all really strong relationships. And it's neat to live in this way. I've been just over 11 years living in this home here. And I've lived with over 300 people in that time. So I've had a lot of really interesting, intimate relationships that also have, the commitment is limited, I guess. And the other day I was having a conversation with one of my roommates who's been here for quite a while. And I have a unique scenario going on because of my financial situation. So I've been renting out my room over the last 2 years and sleeping on the couch. And so this means that I'm paying less than the other people here. And I could see in the body language of one of my roommates that it was really starting to bother him. And so not yesterday, but the day before, I was like, hey, Marcus, I can feel something here, and let's talk about it. And so he's, it was neat because it was hard for him to articulate because it's hard things to say. So he kind of laid it out there for me saying, well, what do you think it is? So I just jumped in and was as honest as possible and said, if for me, I think that it would be a big deal that you pay so much more than I do, and I'm in the common space outside of your room. And, these things would really bother me, and I think might bother me, and I can see that there's something there. And so we talked into that, and it was immediately, obviously, when you talk about things and actually get to the heart of it, it's you can relate to each other, doing that relationship action as a verb. And the other piece which we touched on was that, as some of you all know, like I have a real passion for global systems change and really, making a change in the world. And he watches me and he sees that sometimes I'm I don't stand in my own power necessarily. And so I brought to him that, I could also see that he was maybe judging or disappointed that I'm not fully living in my light. And that was really interesting because he would never say it, but I could see it. And it was really helpful to actually go there. And and he did admit, that was present for him. And he is of a different generation. I'm 47 and he's 21. So there's difference in us. And, he does really respect me, but just wants to see me fully live in my light. So that was really neat to go deeper in that place and be really honest with someone in an intimate relationship, but also a peer. And I think for me, this is the work that we all really need to do to be able to build the muscles of being truly honest and letting people in on the inside of how we're feeling so that we can navigate those kind of touchy places. That's what I got.
So where do we go with that? I don't know.
What's the focus or the purpose of this conversation, except that it's about relationships? I could talk for hours about it, but then again.
May I ask a question, Tammy, just as you were asked the question, Fleming? When your housemate asked you to explicate what he thought you might be referring to, did you feel that he was in some sense not stepping up and not owning the issue and pushing it back on you? And was that part of the, I guess, the difference in culture that maybe you had set up within the house? I don't know if I'm asking this question understandably.
I think it's more to do with who he is rather than something set up in the house. Like, he's just a really kind and loving person. And actually, I was thinking about that specifically because my sister and her son are the same way. They won't approach conflict. It's so deeply uncomfortable to say, look, you know what? This is bugging me. That they just won't do it. But I could feel it in his body language. And I don't want to live that way. So I chose to open the thing, but I could see that, you know, it's baby steps. I needed to show him that I was witnessing and looking and seeing and what my perceptions were. Then he felt safe enough to say, yeah, you're right. And he is younger than I am. I do have a little more experience in ripping off the Band-Aid and just saying, yeah, this is what it is. So yeah, I think we both learned a lot, and he will more easily approach conflict in the future. So thanks for asking.
Thanks for shedding further light on that. If I might, let me just take a few seconds, because for me, there's about 4 really key but very different relationships right now in my life. Just 2.5 weeks ago, my dad just moved in with me. That's the first time we've lived together since I was 16 and I left home. So that's number one, and there's a lot to say there. I'm still in the middle of finalizing a divorce with an ex-wife who I was married to about 21 or 22 years. So there's a lot that still needs to be cleaned up there. And for that, I think, you know, a triggering word for me is commitment, you know, the big C word, in that I took it so seriously, and I didn't see that reciprocated. A third relationship is with my daughter, who's going to come and live with me in about 6 weeks. She's 14 and she's going to be starting high school here. So this will be a 3-generation household in the matter of a couple of months, where just 3 weeks ago, I was living by myself. So that's kind of a cool change to anticipate. And then the fourth I would itemize is my girlfriend, who is, as I get to know her more and more, really trying to cope with some childhood abuse and trauma and you know, some bad decisions as a result of that. And so I'm really trying to really understand how I can support her and yet still not be sucked into a much of the drama and or actual chaos that ensues. So anyway, those are 4 very different but very vital relationships. Not to mention which, you know, the 5th that I would really like to talk about, more even so than those 4, are the kind of relationships that would, if fostered among all of us, you know, not just one-to-one, but if fostered, would create a strong social fabric. And that's the kind of community level feeling and relationship that I would really love to explore. So anyway, that's a quick check-in on what's going on with me. Thanks.
So one question for me, which I think Tammy partly answered, is how to get to talk about the things that need to be talked about, the little sort of issues we might have with each other. How does that even come up? And I feel like personally, even though I feel I'm willing and ready to talk about anything, I sort of usually need some kind of prompt, like somebody needs to sort of bring it up. So like, I think my wife probably does that. She'll like, well, why do you look a little funny? And then I have the opportunity to try to figure out why I look funny and what that means. And then we get to talk about it. But I might not have thought of bringing it up myself. I tend to be a little maybe passive or waiting for sort of a hint or something. So so like by having some people around that bring it out in you, I think that's useful.
I'm curious on that one because about being prompted, I do have that outward sense when I speak with people where I said, you can bring up anything and any topic and I will be willing to talk about it, whether it is easy or hard. But like you said, I will never personally bring that up by myself. I know that probably part of that was upbringing, because when I was younger, I was very forward in saying what I think immediately, and you think it just rolls out, and getting some bad feedback then, and I learned to hold it back in, and I went to the other extreme and just hold everything in, but still keeping that honesty when if you ask for it, you'll get it. If someone asks me my opinion, I will give really my real honest opinion. But I'll not be sugarcoating. So when you were saying that, I was curious if there was an assumption there. So my assumption was, being too forward, people might not be taken aback and not want to go into that conversation because it's just too forward. Is there an assumption there that you have that makes you wait for the prompt and maybe not initiate that?
Personally, I have found in my own life that there's somewhat of a strategy that does kind of work. I mean, I still have issues about maybe I should say certain things more directly, but generally speaking, for me, it works relatively well to respond to what is there. Like many things I do or say or start is a response to something, and I'm reasonably happy with that. I usually have a good sense of what a good response would be. I have more difficulty starting things sort of out of the blue. So I love when somebody else pushes a button somewhere that I can then respond to. But I'm not totally sure if that's good enough, or if I should be more ready to say things directly. That I mean, for me, it's actually not that there are things burning inside of me that I must say. It's more like I could talk about all sorts of things, but I don't know what is appropriate before something is brought up, kind of thing. So I am not totally sure, but it is kind of working for me. It's not a problem for me. And one way I actually solve that is by having people around who are more direct or forward, or who don't need to be, they're not waiting for something. Like, for example, I often get along well with strong, outgoing women, for example, who will sort of sense that, hey, there's something there, and who will just blurt it out. And so if that works well for me, then I have something to respond to. I don't know if that's cheating, but it's a way of sort of having other people cover some of the areas that you don't necessarily do. Not sure.
It comes up for me the question, as I hear you as man, and I hear Tammy, and I have a similar experience, and I hear it often, that women are more straightforward, or are pushing a little bit the buttons, and then maybe men take after a while. So the question is if you see that maybe as a gender difference. I mean, to everybody, no? The question.
I don't think it's a gender difference to be more direct, but I do appreciate that women often tend to be more plugged into things that aren't necessarily being said, more like emotionally what's going on. So I'm more likely to trust the woman to tell me that, hey, we need to talk about this that I didn't notice. It's not so much the directness, it's more like the emotional truth.
Yeah, I meant more the challenging aspect, and we are more likely to, when we notice things, that we really say it. While I see often that men try to avoid.
I don't know. I don't know if I have the same view. I noticed that women are more focused on the relationships and address stuff like that, and men are more focused on the content of things. So, speaking for myself, I would not say that I'm less direct than women to that extent. But for me, the relationship is is less relevant than what we will do, and I'm just more action or content oriented, I would say.
Triggered. Sorry.
I'm not sure who I heard.
Go ahead, please.
I remember, I think when I was about 14 years old, went to a birthday party down the street of a neighbor, and we were playing badminton in the backyard. And I went into the house to get a glass of water. I stepped into the kitchen, and the kitchen was full of women bustling around and working on things. And a kind lady, poured a glass of water for me and handed it to me. And I just stood there for a minute drinking my water, and I just soaked this up. I just had never quite understood something about this before. And it just totally changed my life, that minute in the kitchen full of women. I still probably can't put it into words, and I certainly couldn't at that point, but I think it does have something to do with relationships and community. And in this case, women as exemplars of it. And the male culture really was quite different. And this was a while ago, and it was out in the outlands. So culturally and historically, it's pretty far removed from where we are now. You would think, maybe not. And I just remember experiences with groups of men. There was community and everything, but it was quite a bit different. Anyway, so I think I made some subtle choices then, and I just opened up much more to the woman's experience of relating. I wasn't quite sure where the story was. I've been struggling to all the pieces we've been talking about were trying to connect in my mind, and I couldn't connect them together, but this story just suddenly occurred to me. I just suddenly remembered it. So I think it has some connection, but I guess I leave it to all of us to complete those connections. Thank you.
Ron, I'm really curious. You said that it's just a minute, but it changed you. Like something really happened in that minute. So maybe if you don't mind, just taking a moment to go back to how it felt in your body, like feel what it was. And if there's any perceptions that you recall from being in that kitchen that kind of give us a little bit more shape as to what changed for you, that would be amazing. So body sensations, things you remember.
I don't feel I can rely on the body sensation memory, but I'm not sure if I'm just suggesting it, but I'm pretty sure I felt hot. That's a body sensation. And I was obviously thirsty. I've been exerting myself, and 14 years old, but this is all like detective work in a way. And the sensations were sounds, the physicality of the room and all the people in it, the atmosphere, it was warm. It was hot and humid, and I'm pretty sure there was no air conditioning. And I was standing up, so that's a sensation of my position, bodily position. That's a sensation, and I do remember that. I was standing. I didn't sit down, and
So it was a new feeling, though. Like if there was a new feeling, something that you received in being in that kitchen full of women. So I'm just trying to like feel into what that was so transformative for you. Does that make sense?
yes.
You don't necessarily have to have the answer to it, Ron, but
No, I was just curious.
and you can do what Tammy suggests later also, but it could be interesting to find out what was sort of the key.
I mean, it was about attitude and attitude about relating. That's what changed me. It changed my attitude about relating. And I was much more interested in what I learned and what tended to be more the purview of women than men. These purviews are supposedly less siloed these days. So, but still they're pretty heavily siloed. And so to some extent, I felt more that I was a part of the world of women. I'm part of it. That's what changed. The world that's exemplified by women. It's not, shouldn't be the exclusive property, but, and I'm part of it. That's what changed.
I have a little story too, which is not necessarily about women, but it's about emotions. Like I remember the first time it really caught me how, well, some people work more by emotions than by like the head and the intellect. And I had been used to the earlier part of my life. I was very sort of mental and or intellectual or in my head kind of thing. And I would do things sort of logically. I would think things through and want to do the logical thing. So the first times I ran into people or groups of people that didn't work like that at all, I was sort of stunned at first. I couldn't understand how that worked, but I learned to appreciate it. And one point I particularly remember, when we lived in LA, I went to this improv acting group class every week in Hollywood, incidentally, in a little theater every week for a couple of years, which was wonderful, but that's another story. But the group of people I was with was sort of a different type of people, or I don't have to stereotype it, but there were different people that I normally would hang out with. And a bunch of them had different kinds of problems or issues with each other and so forth. And we often got sort of into a fight about something. It was generally wonderful, but all sorts of things were sort of under the surface, or people were having different kinds of problems. And I would always try to sort of be logical about it. Like, I explain my position, like here, would be reasonable. Here I have the answer to it. And in that group, which was very unusual for me, when I spoke up, I stood up, everybody listened, I said my thing. But my thing was just intellectual. Like here, I heard what you said, here's the logical answer. And everybody in that group just, when I finished talking, they just sort of looked away and started talking about something else. Like, it's like I didn't say anything, because I didn't say anything with emotional content. I wasn't particularly present with my own body. I wasn't really relating to these people. I had analyzed it and found the solution, and I thought it was really logical. But these were people who were completely immune to that. They didn't care. It's like I didn't say anything. And then they went off with their argument afterwards. And at first I just thought that was really odd, but I learned to really love and appreciate people who are more emotional and sometimes irrational and more chaotic and messy, but I learned to like that. And that's not a strict men-women kind of thing, but it also is something I learned to appreciate a lot about women who typically are a little more sort of plugged into emotional feeling kind of stuff in a way. I mean, it's not always like that. There are many exceptions to that, but it's a little bit connected with that. So I'm saying to relate, you kind of need to embrace to some degree this sort of emotional, irrational kind of stuff, which sometimes you just need to be present with. There's nothing you need to do. It's not a solution we're looking for. You don't need to fix it, but you need to sort of be there. And it has helped me it took a while for me to sort of get it, but after I did, I feel better and wiser after having a more sort of relaxed relationship with emotions and irrationality, we could say.
I like the story, Fleming, and I can relate to a lot of it. I didn't know what feeling was. We had something at home like sentiments. That's some weird stuff happening at other people. And it was 90, I just calculated, it was 1969. That's how you say it in English, that I first went to a holiday week on my own. And I chose something that was called something very interesting called sensitivity training. That was hip in those days. And there I spent a week with people feeling things. That was very new to me. And that was, looking back, was kind of start of the journey I think I'm still on, that I kind of lived up here. And I'm still kind of descending down and embodying all the rest of it. So I learned all the tricks and things and all kind of difference. I have a huge mental model of what it probably could be, but I'm still working on it.
I also have a little story, if you are done, Harry. So I would like to talk about what close relationships mean to me, and about one issue that I have actually question that I ask myself often nowadays: how to maintain the quality of the close relationships we used to have with our friends or partner or family with the time, and especially if it's by distance. So for me, close relationships mean giving and receiving help or love, unconditional, being very committed to someone, like engaging in being close to a person when that person will need it for a long time. And another thing that is very important to me, and it summarizes a lot the meaning of close relationship to me, is to know why the other one is crying without that person telling you. So anticipating possible needs or problems that that person could have, because I often see people that say, we are friends and everything, and I realize that they never talk about very deep things, apart of having chit chats and discussing about the weather and about holidays and about work. If one day they will find each other crying in the street, they won't know why they're crying there, which for me would mean that it's not a close relationship. And I committed 10 times ago to, I can say committed to one of my best friends, to be together for her forever. It's a girl, a friend, a colleague. And it was very fast. I remember we meet at school. We spent a few hours together, a few days together in the classroom. And I realized she might be that kind of friend that I've been searching for all my life. And I discussed about it with her, and we promised to be together forever. And we really experienced amazing moments together. We had the opportunity to give support to each other unconditional, and we both lived very bad and good moments together and with other people, and we've been supporting each other during this time. She even reacted very strangely in some moments of her life. For example, I remember 8 years ago, she once told me, I don't want to see you anymore for a while. I need time to find myself, and I need to find the meaning in life. And she told me, I won't come to school, and I don't want to see you. Please leave me alone. And I felt very sad, because I felt that was a bit selfish, because I invested time in her and everything. But after this period, she came back to me, and we could discuss about it, and our friendship was great again. But I realized during with the time we started changing. So I started changing, she started changing. We have less things in common. We have different lives. From a family point of view, we are not as sociable, the two of us, and it starts to get very hard after these 10 years to have deep discussions, like, I don't know, philosophical discussions, or giving ourselves life advices and everything. And yeah, I was wondering what do you do to maintain the quality of your the relationships you have with your friends that live far away, or your partner, if he or she lives far away, or with your family? Or do you find this challenging?
I was talking to Luna the other day about something that I feel is related, that we stop in relationships, how we stop talking about things. Like, there are certain things that it's just not open for discussion. And I'm curious as to what happens there. You know, it sounds like in that long relationship of yours, Simona, like, there maybe, as you changed, things that you might have talked about before, you're not talking about. She was talking about it in terms of a relationship as well, who they just, for some reason, there's topics that aren't up for talking about. And how do you talk about the things that how do you get in there? It's a question. I don't know.
I mean, if I start, if I tell her, let's discuss about time or eternity or spiritual things, she will start the discussion with me, but it doesn't come as natural as before. I remember that sometimes we were, I don't know, we were studying for maths exams together, and she was waking up at 4 in the morning, and she was asking me, how do I define time at 4 in the morning? And I found that very, very interesting. And I think I could have such a special relationship with someone. I mean, I think it's very hard to have a special relationship with someone in a way that you find amazing, that someone can come up with these kind of questions in the middle of the night, and appreciate how much you love the fact that the person lives in her own world and takes time to appreciate and understand things in this busy world. And I forgot what I wanted to say, but what was your question? How did when did it stop? Or
I'm just curious, for you and everyone, what are those barriers between bringing up the things that we stop being able to talk about somehow? Or if I just think that it's interesting in relationships as they develop, sometimes there's no go zones. And, you know, what is that for the different people's experience, including your own, Simona?
Can I jump in here for a moment? I think it has very much to do with shame. There is something which appears And if it's true or not, it's not the question, but somebody thinks there is something, there might be something, and then comes up shame, and then from that moment up, the openness which has happened before is sort of compromised. And when there is not a commitment, like Fleming said, that you go through everything, if there's not this commitment, then it's very likely that the relationship sort of draws back. And then when once it has begun to walk on eggshells around certain things, then it is sort of downward spiral, you know. So the thing is to really find out this moment and have the commitment, and even if it's uncomfortable. But, you know, in the past, it has happened to me also very often, so it's so easy.
I'd love to make a comment here, if I may.
Please do.
And that would be something I learned quite a few years ago, is to ask for permission to talk about certain subjects. So I might say, is it okay to talk about emotions, or is that forbidden or not wanted? Is it okay to talk about your dog died yesterday? Is it okay to talk about anything at all? And if the other person says yes, congruently, okay, fine. We're on our way, and if they say no, verbally or non-verbally, I take it as no, it's not okay. And that makes conversations a heck of a lot easier for me. I don't know if it would work for anybody else.
I have two stories I can share on this kind of thing. So I have someone that I consider my best friend. We met when I was 12 years old. And indeed, at one period of time, like you, Simona, we were spending days and hours on end together, having fun together. I think the peak of that was at one point where we were talking like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were chatting. And then at one point we said, what do we do today? And we said just, all right, let's go to Disneyland. And then just in that right afternoon, we went to Disneyland. Yet through time, indeed, that relationship morphed and waned a little bit, where I don't get the opportunity to see him as often. And we don't get into the same kind of deep conversations that we had then. And like you mentioned, Martin, it was like there's some kind of permission barriers that came up that we don't talk on those topics anymore. What came out as I tried to probe and understand a little bit, what I realized is indeed we were going in different directions. At one point, our priorities changed. There were incongruency in what he wanted and what he was saying. And on my end, I felt less and less comfortable on my end to spend as much time with him on certain topics. So at one point, it filtered down to me to build up that internal role that emotional issues, he's not the right person to go and exchange and find support there. Practical issues, business, that's fine. But anything deeper emotions, that's not the right fit. But it was in test for me. I realized that through testing the ground with him, trying to bring it up, feeling that sense that, oh, I'm someone who was ambitious, who wanted to move forward and change, and hearing him, complaining again over again that he wanted to change but doesn't do anything about it, and just get that kind of clash. So my synthesis of that conversation, of that relationship was, we had similar values when we were kids, like 12, 13. But as we grew, evolved, adopted, our priorities changed, which made that much more difficult to exchange. I still consider him my best friend. I still hold him very dearly in my heart. But indeed, I know that our relationship has morphed and will not get back to that same place that we had before. So I learned to appreciate it, to what it brought then, and today move forward to other things. And to complete that, the second part of the story, as you said, Martin, is about permission, about talking with those. I coach people for a living. So, among other things. And one of those indeed is to get the opportunity to talk to people with their real issues deep and get in there very quickly and skip over all the fluff talk. But what I notice every time is to go through that, it's not just a question of permission. Sometimes it's a question of pressure. Sometimes we bring up a topic that gets a little pressure on the person. He starts feeling, or she starts feeling uncomfortable and incongruent there. So I had one, I was coaching him on an issue within his community, and he was having conflicts with others. And at first he didn't want to badmouth others because it was important to him, but I could feel and I could see that it added a lot of turmoil inside of him. So by pressing a little bit on the topic, pushing him to that point of discomfort, at one point he hit that point where he released and started really speaking honestly. And at that point, we went to an open discussions there. And that's where I learned that sometimes I discovered sometimes I really need to push people into a corner for them to open up. And once they do, we get this very intense connection that grows, and I build friendships that way forever and ever. So I don't know if it's forever, but it is, until now, it has lasted pretty long. So these are my experiences on that end.
Has anybody pushed you that far, Jean-Paul?
I'll be honest, very few. Like you said, Fleming, I'm part of those people who don't want to go deep without someone having to probe that. And I guess in the past 15 years, I only had one person being present enough to probe enough and be there long enough, knowing that I'm hurting, and giving me that space and that permission to really say what's on my mind and forget all the social rules and really say what's on my heart. And that's bad or not, doesn't matter. It's what's real for me.
This topic, as Jean-Paul, you and Fleming and others have brought up about being drawn into conversations about deeper topics, is a triggering thing for me. Because of my divorce and my relationship with my ex-wife, that's how things started, and to me, I associate some passive aggressiveness with that kind of behavior. And so for me, when it was first brought up, it was like, there's this fine line between not wanting to dump all over everyone, but also not addressing what's really true and happening. And it's a really fine balance. I can't say that I've found it. I can't say that I've mastered it. It's a skill, I think, that is worthy of being explored and possibly learned and mastered. So anyway, that's where I got triggered when some of this happened, is because, in my mind, if I see this behavior, is it my role to pull something out, or is someone actually going to step up and actually be truthful? There's a lot of judgment around that in me as well. And then when it comes to other things about men, and now taking this behavior and associating more generally with a class of people, i.e., like 50% of the population, to me, it begins to be a little bit too much of a stereotype. And that to me is also triggering, because then you're judging before you know the individual. And that to me is something that I've been struggling to figure out. Again, there's a lot of judgment there. Because, if you figure that men are not very emotional or even not able to talk about it, it's kind of like, talking to a guy who understands 4 words. And here, again, the stereotype is women understand about 100 different words about nuanced emotions, and men only have 4 words to express, how they feel, So there's this disconnect between this stereotype of how women and men communicate. Anyway, so I just wanted to acknowledge it. I've been sitting here being triggered, and I wanted to at least take my responsibility and see it for me. But at the same time, this balance in my mind of, am I blurting out too much? Am I actually, dumping all over you guys? While at the same time still trying to be honest and sensitive to myself. Over.
So great, Biasem. I'd like to acknowledge you for blurting it out instead of keeping it in. I think there's some nuances there that are important. Like, I think if that's what one feels, then one should blurt it out. But I think quite often one might be uncomfortable without really noticing it. Like, one might not notice before somebody puts their finger on it and pulls it out. That's sometimes the case for me. I very rarely feel I'm holding something back. But sometimes somebody might draw something out of me that I didn't realize. I'm perfectly fine with spilling all the beans as soon as they say it, but I didn't notice. If I did notice, I would, generally speaking, say it. So there's a fine sort of nuance there. And I think it's a good thing to follow Sam's example, that if it really is triggering you, then spill it out. And I have one particular point to that, which is it doesn't have to make sense. It's one thing I learned, well, from various places, but one of them is the radical honesty idea and books that, I mean, if there's something that's triggering you need to say or you're angry about, well, you need to say it. It doesn't have to be backed up by good reasons. It might be stupid reasons that you're angry about something. I mean, might not really make sense once you've said it and talked it over, but you still need to say it. So you still need to be able to say, like, I'm angry at you for not being taller. I really wanted a taller girlfriend. I mean, that's stupid. She cannot do anything about that. But the truth might be you really feel angry because she's not taller. And by being willing to say that and go out on a limb and say what it is that's irritating to you, and you might or might not realize along the way that it doesn't make sense, but it's still the truth of what you felt. It's emotionally true. Whether it's factually true, that's a different thing. But by being willing to say it, even though it's ridiculous, and you don't have to be made wrong because it's ridiculous. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have said it. Just means that's what you felt, and it's better to spill it than to keep it in.
But what's important is also how you do it. But some people, you uncork the bottle and there's some really nasty stuff coming out that I cannot handle.
I absolutely agree with you, Harry, on that, because there's a lot of conversations I do know that I will hold back because I perceive or I imagine that the person in front of me will not be able to handle the kind of information that I share. And I went at one point to a therapy group, and there was like 15 person around. And I shared my story, my past traumas to the group. And the reaction of the group, the grievance, oh, I'm sorry that it happened to you type of attitude, made me close down a little bit. That sensation that, oh, I am really dumping something and they are not able to catalyze, canalize, or hear it. Whereas in my personal way of dealing with people, because having a lot of conversations before with people who wanted to commit suicide, people who have been raped, people who are having a hard relationship, when they share it to me, I can be there and not react to it visually, or so it like gives them permission that what you're saying can be heard. And that it's something that can happen. It was bad, but it does happen. So, I do agree that we can't say it to everyone because some people have not learned yet how to listen to the stories. And in those stories actually triggers a lot of emotional reactions that they're not ready to handle yet. And The only other thing I wanted to mention, Sam, is with mentioning about gender differences. Personally, I don't see gender differences in terms of men and women, but masculine and feminine. It's a masculine and feminine energy. In some men, like Ron, seems to have a more feminine energy that that person lives in, or others will live in more masculine energy. The story that I have related to that was, I'm more androgynous type, so I don't really know if I was masculine or feminine. And I read a lot about it, but don't know about it. But I had this opportunity once when I went to the United States for a Western Swing Convention, and I met a few girls that were really feminine to their core. And, you know, they were hugging, loving, we spent time together, we chit-chatted. And when I flew back home and I stepped into the house and met the women that I had, my girlfriend and her daughter, I had a way more assertive, masculine vibe to it, to the way I was acting to them, that I had never done before because I never felt the need about it. But then it has this internal impulse of, no, I'm the leader here. I'm going to assert. You know, we're going to sit on the sofa. I'll take you in my arm, you in my arm. Come, I'll hug you guys. No permission, nothing. And it lasted about a week or so. But that was my experience with actually feeling masculine and feminine energy, where instead of just thinking about it, and it was a very peculiar sensation of like Fleming being in control, and suddenly there's no control. It just boom, it's just natural impulse and going out there. So do consider that when we're differentiating masculine to feminine. My girlfriend, for instance, is masculine. She has a more masculine vibe to it. Like she can only do one thing at a time, and she loves cars. And at home, I do multiple things at a time, and I love fashion. So it's just energy, not men and women, at least in terms of thinking.
Something I know it's past the hour. I wanted to give you guys a little mental image of what is in my mind about community and relationships to build community. And it's a fishing net kind of metaphor, you know. I see that so much of our current community is a person being dependent on, let's say, a spouse or a welfare office or a job. And there's very tenuous but very isolated relationships that kind of define and support you. And it seems to me that anytime one of those is damaged or weakened or in fact broken, that one is in dire straits in today's society. And what I imagine in my own mind about a community and society that I would love to live in is one where we have these connections with each other, you know, and it's a big fishing net, and I've got, 96 different connections, each to another part of the net, Tammy, Fleming, Jean-Paul, Harry, Ron, all of you. And the net's going to flex, it's going to flex up according to the ocean and the fish that swim into it or whatever. And at sometimes these two nodes are going to be very close, and at some other times these two corners are going to be, but it's going to be oscillating, and it's going to be dynamic, and it's going to be naturally that way. So I don't feel a problem with, let's say, losing touch with my best friend from high school, David, for 20 odd years, because when we get together again, it's like no time ever passed. So these are the kinds of relationships that I would love to see us have about 150 of, each of us. And they all feel different, and they all have their different cycles and their different energies, and they all flex differently. So that's the model that I would love to see, and that's the kind of notion I would like to bring to the relationship topic. And I'm sorry it's already past the hour before I got to introduce that. Okay, in my mind, over. Thanks.
Well, since you mentioned the hour, it is past the hour, and we should move towards closing time, even though this is great. So we can start moving towards having a bit of a meta perspective on how has this worked for you as an experiment and as a conversation. How did you like this? What did you like about it?
I'm going to jump in and just, I'm curious about the open space and the sense of agreed upon purpose and how those two things interact. Because when I was telling the story, I lost a sense of like around what was happening for me here in the home with my roommate. I sort of lost the tenuous connection to the purpose of the conversation in a way. That's just curious to me. And there was another person that was like, yes, what is the purpose of this conversation again? So it's not a judgment or anything like that. It's just, how do we weave along with the purpose, with that openness, and hold it at the same time? I feel like we're doing well with it, but I think that the more intentional we are about these things, the easier it is for people to really hook into it in the limited time we have.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Martin.
It's okay, you can talk, Harry, I think.
Okay, I see, I experience there are a lot of stories this hour. Mostly we don't talk about our own life and our own stories, so there are a lot of stories shared, which I appreciate and help me to relate to you guys as well. On the other hand, what we did less than other times is kind of be in the moment and sense whatever happens to me, because I was so focused on the story of either one of you. So it was that way more of a mental talking about things than being into a certain experience for me. Thank you.
I actually felt this sort of very nicely connected in a way, like we're actually really talking about something and being present with it and going quite deep with it. Don't know if it was mental necessarily. I liked the different stories, personal sharing of stories, and I felt we all connected with it. And I sort of wish for us to do more of that. And I think we went rather straight for it, which was very nice.
I would agree with you, Fleming, because I experience this as going deeper in many ways by telling stories and not so much about how I feel today and how hot it is or something, you know what I mean? I think that by listening to other people's stories, sometimes you can go more in connection than listening to what they are feeling just now. You know, that's like a presentation. Here I am, and now I tell you what is with me. While the stories allow you to go into the story with your imagination and get to know the person. So I really liked it today.
I did not try to suggest that I did not like it.
Can I continue? Okay, I also appreciated the meeting. It's been a long time since I tried to connect because it's quite early for me, but I'm happy I finally did it. And I think it's, I joined the meeting because I was curious about it, because I think Fleming finds very interesting topics, and it's essential to sometimes to have deeper conversations with people, so that we manage to take a step back and think about things that we don't often talk about or think about, and because it's essential to understand ourselves and maybe the other people around us. And also, I was surprised. Yeah, I was surprised that I found myself in some things that Jean-Paul said 3 or 4 times, and I was like, oh yeah, I also think the same thing, and it's amazing to know that someone that you know don't know somewhere in the world, even if I guess you're not too far away, feels and experiences the same things. And maybe now I'm more motivated to ask myself some more questions and change something. Or so. Thank you, Fleming.
What I felt also in this conversation was it felt like it was driven by a need, like we might each have different ones, but it was sort of driven about something we actually wanted to understand better. It had personal meaning to us. It was not just sort of a topic that we can talk about. Like each of us somehow seemed to have a drive to be better at relationships somehow, and I liked that feeling.
I'll comment that a few times I felt really irritated in this hour. I felt thoroughly ignored until I realized my microphone was on mute. Don't know if you guys have done that.
Oh, I think I at some point muted you. Were the only one not muted, so I muted you at some point because there was some feedback or something.
Oh, really?
No, we don't want to ignore you.
Okay, thanks for the acknowledgement.
I guess you could make, if that happens, you can always make frantic hand signals, you know.
Oh, that's not
or whatever.
me.
That might work.
Yes.
There's always the chat.
Nah, if I'm ignored, I'm ignored. I relax and enjoy it.
Oh, if you like it, we can do it again.
Well, you can write in capital letters in the chat, "Why is everybody ignoring me?" Question mark, exclamation
Where
mark.
the hell is the chat?
There, so you click, there's a chat underneath, and
Oh, yeah.
so that's another channel to comment and so
Something,
forth.
Fleming, that might be incredible if it's possible.
Yeah,
Is
and
to have some sort of banner headline on this screen that has the purpose of the meeting, the purpose of the discussion, because I totally forgot what it was. And it would be nice to have it there to remind me. I don't know about you guys.
maybe sometimes it's deliberately a little fuzzy what it is, so it might be hard
fuzzy
to.
is fine.
But
you can say fuzzy. That's the title.
yeah. What relationship? What is it?
It might be nice to pop that
Did you mean
into
a headline? Did you mean a headline literally on this video screen that we're looking at?
Yeah, where it says Zoom meeting at the top. There might be a way just to have a 5-word banner.
I don't know if that is
communication with chickens or whatever.
There are possibilities for that.
Okay, great. I have no idea. Well, it's good to have been here. I squeezed some time out at the last moment. I'm glad I did. Good to see you, Fleming.
It's great that you're here, and thank you for your excellent, useful feedback on the permission. Very nice. I like that.
Oh, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yes.
Okay, time to say goodbye.
So any last comments before we end off, Jean-Paul?
I wanted to thank you for the invitation, because I know that you do a lot of strange experiments left and right, but never really had the opportunity of participating in one. And when I saw this meeting, it was when I was curious and wanted to chime in. And I do thank you for the warning that you had sent me beforehand, because I really did, it's the first time I'd ever done any of this before, so I was just kind of curious of what was happening here. But I do admit, like you, Fleming, as I was hearing the conversation, I did feel that there was a need of understanding. That's what came up. That was what I felt most out of our conversation. It was more like, you know, why was the question that popped up in my mind regularly in here. But what I loved is indeed through the answers that we were providing, it wasn't really theory, but through the stories, it's a real experience that we're talking about, not fluff talk that, you know, we've read in a book and pull up that we never really experienced. And that's really what I felt touching as I listened to the different stories and the different sharing of everyone. And I thank you all for that. It was very heart-opening.
So thank you, and thank you all for coming, particularly you who are here for the first time, Jean-Paul, Simona, Martin. We don't see you very often. Always lovely to see you, and the rest of you.
Thank you, Fleming.
It's always great. So we're going to end off. For anybody who's still around, who has a few minutes, we're going to do a short planning session afterwards for what to do next, which is what we usually do. And anybody who is interested are willing to hang around. But otherwise, I'm going to tell you, thank you all for coming. See you another time. It was lovely. Goodbye and have a wonderful day.